Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. This morning we're joined by, I believe, a familiar face to many of you, if not all of you. She is Dr. Jill Stein of Lexington, two-time Green Party nominee for president and for governor of Massachusetts. Dr. Stein, welcome.
It's great to be with you, John.
Good to have you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
One of the main reasons you're here is that your 2016 campaign for president is being investigated by the Senate Intelligence Committee for possible, quote, collusion with the Russians, according to the chairman of that committee. The ranking Democrat on that committee told BuzzFeed they were interested in your attendance at a December 2015 celebration of the Russian propaganda channel RT, and your past defense of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. They're under scrutiny for their role in publicizing politically damaging info gathered by the Russians. So that's the backdrop. So let's cut right to the chase. Were there ever contacts between the Russians and your campaign aimed at influencing your behavior or the course of the election?
Absolutely not. I mean, this is a year's worth of a smear campaign that began actually by some Democratic Party operatives after the embarrassing emails revealed collusion by the Democratic Party with Hillary Clinton's campaign in order to interfere with our election. In fact, to smear Bernie Sanders, to elevate Donald Trump and make him one of the so-called Pied Piper candidates and push the whole agenda to the right and create an easy playing field for Hillary Clinton's win. That smear campaign against me began after these emails that were so embarrassing to the Democrats. And the same people who launched that smear campaign are now celebrating that I'm being investigated really as a consequence of this smear. There is no factual basis to this smear. I attended a conference. This wasn't just a celebration. Yes, it was 10 years of RT, which is a state-controlled media, much like the BBC is also a state-financed media. It has its point of view, that's absolutely for sure. And there's much I don't agree with on RT. There's much I don't agree with on Fox or on MSNBC. But I appear on all of them. And RT actually has some very valuable journalists like Chris Hedges, for example, and others who've been fired from corporate media because they talk about the war. So, you know, in an election that had the two most disliked, untrusted candidates in our history, where the corporate media was pretty much blacking out opposition that the American people were clamoring for, you know, it was of service to the American people to be heard in any way that I could.
So, Dr. Stein, there's a widely circulated photo of your table at that dinner.
Yes.
And you're there across from President Putin. And Michael Flynn, who went on to become a top Trump advisor and national security advisor before first resigning over, then pleading guilty to lying to the feds about the Russia probe. Why were you at that dinner?
So I was at a conference, and if you want to know what I said at the conference, it's all on the web,
right,
where I called out the Russian government as well as the United States for these outrageous wars in the Middle East that are bankrupting both of our countries and only expanding the cause of terrorism.
Let me rephrase my question. Why do you think they had you at that table?
I was there along with Rocky Anderson, the former mayor of Salt Lake City,
right,
and the former Justice Party candidate, who was also heard on RT as a peace advocate. I was there along with Jesse Ventura, the former governor of Minnesota, who was also a major peace proponent.
Not at the Putin table, though.
Well, you know who was at the Putin table? The foreign diplomats who were in the first panel. And you can hear that first panel and hear everything I said, how I called out both the Russian government and the United States government for our endless war on terror.
So we have to break. But bottom line, I hear you saying you were there, you were put there, there's nothing to it.
No
it's smoke and
there.
no fire.
No backroom deals. In fact, we weren't introduced. Nobody was introduced. This table was really an illusion. Yeah. It was really a private dinner between myself and the German diplomat sitting next to me, who was the only person in earshot who spoke English. Everybody else was busy talking Russian. I don't know who Flynn talked to. He and I did not communicate. He introduced himself briefly to me before we sat down. I gave him my elevator speech about a peace offensive in the Middle East. He was not interested. Our conversation ended right there. This was all above board, critical stuff that we should have been talking about in the campaign and that we should be talking about now.
All right, let me take that break and we'll continue our conversation with Dr. Jill Stein from the Green Party in just a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Jill Stein, the 2016 Green Party nominee for president. And Dr. Stein, you made a comment when it was first announced that the Senate Intelligence Committee is looking at your campaign as part of its Russia probe. You said, quote, "This smacks of the dangerous underbelly of these investigations. The extent to which they exercise overreach, politicizing, and sensationalism is a danger to democracy, especially in the current climate of all-out war on our First Amendment rights," end quote. Does that analysis by you also apply to them looking at the Trump campaign?
I think it's really important. This investigation has a really important mission. When Donald Trump fired James Comey and, tried to protect Flynn, and many members of Donald Trump's administration were lying to cover up their contacts with Russians, you had to ask, what are they covering up? And is justice being obstructed? And I think it's really important that that investigation continue. But to the degree that the investigation exercises overreach, and in this case, in my case, it's a bipartisan committee, the Senate Select Intelligence Committee, bipartisan committee investigating an independent candidate for whom there is zero evidence of nefarious dealings with the Russians whatsoever. We have not only been public, transparent, operating with integrity. We're raising the bar. I don't accept money from Russian oligarchs. I don't accept money from American oligarchs. So we've been above board entirely. And for them to be focusing on me now, I think really tarnishes the integrity of their investigation.
Do you believe they've got the goods on the Trump campaign?
I think Mueller is proceeding methodically and quietly as he should, and his committee is not leaking to the press. They are not sensationalizing. They're keeping this very quiet. Yeah. And that's the way it ought to proceed, like a real investigation. I think what is happening now with this effort to smear me and independent politics and an anti-war campaign, I think really takes them off message and sort of verifies the questions that have been thrown at this committee to start with.
It strikes me this is sort of a piece with the widely, well, I don't know how widely held this belief is, but you hear it all the time. We've talked about it after some of your past campaigns, that by running, you pulled in the key states that swung the Electoral College to Trump. The Green Party pulled twice the margin of Trump's victory in those states. And we've gone through this whole thing. Those votes are not necessarily transferable to Hillary Clinton.
In fact, we know from exit polls that over 60% of people who voted Green would not have come out to vote, and of the remainder who would, many of them would have gone to Trump. So I think it's pure, it's outrageous for the Clinton campaign to assume that they own our votes. They have to earn our votes. Right. They didn't. And this whole issue of splitting could be solved in a heartbeat by enacting a simple reform called ranked choice voting. It allows voters to rank their choices so there's never any split vote. You can vote for an underdog that you agree with, and if your first choice loses, your vote is automatically reassigned to your second choice. So there's never any splitting. They could solve this problem, but you know what they do? In the state of Maine, this was just passed on a statewide basis. Democrats and Republicans are trying to repeal the voter referendum to create real choice voting. They're trying to sabotage it because they don't want open choices. They want to extort your vote and have a vote based on fear. That's not going to get our democracy where we need to go.
Our time is up, but I do want to very quickly ask you, will we see your name on a ballot again?
We'll see. That's not my focus. I'm an activist long before I'm a political candidate. I'm a mother on fire, and I think our generation is facing a very grim future, and it is my daily cause to try to change this system to enable our younger generation to actually have a future. Whether we're looking at war, nuclear weapons, climate change, it's not getting solved by the two parties that created it and take money from the, the political sponsors of this crisis.
Come back again
I'd love
soon,
to.
and we'll continue this conversation.
Sounds great. It's
Thank
a
you.
deal. Thank you, John.
Dr. Jill Stein, our guest here on WBZ. That's my time. Now I'm turning it back over to my colleagues for more WBZ News.